Garfield, that lasagna-loving cat, has hit the big screen with some mixed reviews, and for those calling it terrible, introducing Garfield Gets Real. Or should I say, Garfield Gets really bad. See, the creator of Garfield, Jim Davis, had been working on a script for a Garfield movie since 1996, and you think this direct-to-video movie would be something quite memorable, but for all the wrong reasons. So let's dive in and look at this cinematic train wreck, shall we? The movie begins with a long panning shot of this cartoon world appearing in front of our eyes like something out of a Mickey Mouse Clubhouse cartoon. We are immediately introduced to Garfield, voiced by the iconic Frank Welker. This man has done every animated character you can possibly imagine. So for everything I find wrong with this movie, he's definitely the best part. Garfield is awoken by a bright light emerging from the window. Now this would feel more exciting if our main character Garfield wasn't constantly slamming his head against the wall, which is something the audience want to do after watching this movie. Anyways, Garfield leaves his room in shambles, deciding to head to breakfast to have eggs and bacon. No lasagna? Are you kidding me? It's not even mentioned once. Unfortunately, Garfield is extra depressed today because it's Monday, and he hates Mondays. But John tells him to suck it up because they have to leave for work. As their car pulls out of the driveway, we get a better look at this sickly color palette of a city, as Garfield picks up his crush Arlene and Nerman. Ugh. Just listen to this creature.
And you hate Mondays, M to the undays. You hate 'em.
Nermal is by far one of the single most annoying characters I have ever seen, and not in a good way. His only purpose is to constantly annoy our characters and break up what would otherwise be considered relatively passable scenes. Garfield and friends arrive at Comic Studios. How original. They walk into a room filled with so many unnecessary cameos that it will put the MCU's multiverse to shame. And oh boy, these character designs. I know this was only 2007, but it's even rough by those standards, when your CGI characters are similar to the likes of Video Bengado, a studio infamous for its low-budget cash grab garbage ripoffs of well-known films. Your film has officially fallen into some special territory of bad. But there's actually a reason for these characters being here. See, at comic studios, each character has to act out their own comic strips like an SNL skit. Their performance is photographed, then printed, and transferred into the real world. Somehow. Now Garfield is tired of this constant routine and wants to take a nap. And I don't blame him. Every time we actually get an emotional scene with Garfield talking about his depression, it's always interrupted by some stupid side character. Like I was actually enjoying this scene between Arlene and Garfield, further establishing their intimate love with each other, which is quite profound and sweet. Or his small talk with Zelda, the catering lady, which is quite charming. But no, we have to show Billy Bear blowing snot on everyone because that's what the kids want. Oh look, he's so goofy! Every scene in this movie that Garfield isn't in gets progressively worse.
Oh man, I gotta get out of this place.
My thoughts exactly. Garfield heads to the technical booth to talk to Eli, who gives some poignant advice.
A lot of people would kill to do what you do.
The court rules in favor of Garfield.
I'm actually starting to get invested in this character. But wait, we have to cut to Bonita and Walter telling some very unfunny jokes. At least the director is on the audience's side and signals an end to this bore of a scene. He tells this woman Betty to finish printing the comic strips. And is it just me, or does she look like a cross between Daphne and Velma from Scooby-Doo? All the characters in the studio gather in the auditorium to view the day's work. We get a closer look at the comic strips, which I still think is a neat concept if it wasn't handled so creepily. Each comic strip acts as a camera into the real world. They can change channels like a TV remote to view the audience's reaction to the comic strip. I hope no one brings their paper to the toilet. While flicking through different newspapers, Garfield notices a cart stacked full of delicious hot dogs. He becomes so fixated by the sight that he begins a strange daydream full of floating hot dogs and dancing condiments. Meanwhile, Odie has been on a critical side quest to keep his bone away from the prop person. Oh, Garfield, you troll. Odie tries to hide his bone behind a patch in the screen that leads to the real world. An alarm goes off in the studio that wakes Garfield from his fever dream. Eli warns them of the real danger presented by the real world.
Everybody stay away from the patch in the screen, or you'll end up in the real world, with no way back.
Like, why are they explaining this now? I feel like if the real world is so dangerous, they shouldn't make this so accessible. Well, don't think about it, because the plot. Garfield is convinced that traveling to the real world is the change he needs in his life. His entire motivation for traveling through the screen is to eat a cart full of hot dogs. How compelling. So now Garfield and Odie are stuck in the real world, and one thing that really bothers me is there's nothing really distinguishing the real world from the cartoon world. Also, Odie gets in these Tom and Jerry shenanigans with these chihuahua-looking dogs, and these skits go on for far too long. Oh look, he's playing whack-a-mole with the little doggies. Oh whoop-de-doo. Garfield, on the other hand, is looking for his first love. Food. At the closest garbage can.
I ain't no trash can, fella.
Oh my gosh. No character in a Garfield film should have an entrance so horrific that it rivals the unmitigated terror of a Five Nights at Freddy jump scare. This street cat is named Shey, and his first request to Garfield is to go to a movie. And instead of, I don't know, running as fast as you possibly can in the opposite direction, he actually says yes. Garfield, you've known this cat for approximately 5 seconds, and he's told you the real life equivalent of, I have candy in my van. You want some? Luckily, this street cat isn't much of a threat and introduces us to some new characters, a part of Club Shey. And I have to admit, this is the first scene I even remotely laughed at. The humans in the real world become so annoyed by Garfield and friends' antics that they decide to pelt food at them from their apartment windows. I believe your film should not make you feel absolute joy seeing your favorite characters attacked. After all, there's more than one way to skin a cat. Oh, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Shey shows Garfield a place where they can sleep for the night, where Garfield drinks some very odd coffee. How funny! In the morning, Shey decides it's time for a little dumpster diving. So back to the park, because we apparently have nothing else to do in this movie. Garfield glances at a newspaper, noticing that the Garfield comic strip has been cancelled. That doesn't even make sense. We saw the last completed strip sent out yesterday. It's almost like this movie is forgetting its own logic as we go along. Everyone remaining at the studio assembles to brainstorm ideas to rescue Garfield. Walter has an idea, but they dismiss it. Better luck next time, pal. Back at the corporate office, the search for new characters has been rather unsuccessful. Until...
Hail and hearty!
Yes, Hale and Hardy, our main antagonists that sound like a bad Arnold Schwarzenegger impression.
We to see about that. Dog abuser.
Try to strike a deal. It's up to Garfield to convince corporate to give them another shot. This entire scene reminds me of that one meme. Corporate wants you to find the difference between this picture and this picture. It's the same picture.
If the strip isn't back in the paper in 24 hours, we've got to deal with Hale and Hardy.
Now all they have to do is find a way back. Don't tell me they're going back to the park. I guess it's kind of cool that Arlene tosses a roast of Garfield through the screen. Especially since she's been the most dedicated to getting Garfield home. And all this is alienated by one of the single most stupidest things in the entire movie. Garfield has already spent the entire day hurling himself at the pavement. They even attempt to flatten themselves into the page with a steamroller. Yes, this actually happens. At this point, Garfield has pretty much given up. So the solution to our characters' problems should not be handed to them on a silver platter. I say this because Garfield notices a woman playing an accordion. This reminds him of Walter from earlier in the film and theorizes a larger version could get them home. And don't say love conquers all, because that's what the movie wants us to believe. That's the kind of logic I expect from Barney the dinosaur. Walter is now responsible for building the device he nicknames the Bonita-nator, named after his wife. To be fair, Bonita has been basically bullying Walter throughout this entire movie, so admittedly I find this roast pure comedy gold. So Walter's like, because the blade on the front reminds me of that big honking nose of yours, dear. Now I have a job to do. And by the way, I did steal your cookies. And even after all that, Bonita's only worried about her cookies. Talk about priorities. My cookies? But that's in stark contrast to what this movie considers humor. Look, they're destroying John's car. Isn't that funny? This character's taking a bath. Do you like bathroom humor? This dog's drinking out of the toilet. That's just gross. Do you remember those two buff dogs from earlier? Well, they have finally tracked down Garfield's location. And to make sure Garfield doesn't get his comic strip back, they tie them up and unintentionally start the building on fire. Did I mention this was a kids movie? I find it ironic that the only reason they decide to rescue Garfield is Eli notices the building's on fire. Like, if he didn't look in the first place, these guys would be toast.
Say, something is burning around here.
Everyone works together to push the Bonita-nator through the screen and bridge both worlds together. They run into a burning building to help Garfield and friends escape. Also, I really love how comically big this explosion is. Like, did they escape from a dynamite factory or something? Because this laundry cart looks suspiciously similar to a mine cart. They crash through the Bonita-nator back into the studio. The tape holders tape the screen back together. I feel like we could have used these guys at the start of the film, but then none of this would have happened.
Kill me. We're nearly done. Jesus. It's already... Right, last one. Come on, guys.
The ending of the film should be rather simple. Garfield and friends make it back home, Garfield gets a kiss, and the dogs get the shaft after Garfield gets his comic strip back with the new edition of Shey. Cue the music. They have a dance party? This feels like a violation. It seems wrong. Is this on another planet or something? This is really how it ends? Wow. Actually, the last couple of seconds shows the group of dogs from earlier emerging into the cartoon world. Oh no. What will we ever do? Were they trying to open a door to another sequel? Oh wait, there's two more? Well, overall, this movie had such potential, with some engrossing character scenes that further explored Garfield's character. It's a shame they are constantly interrupted by stupid, unfunny jokes and plot points so contrived that it alienated any goodwill the audience had left. It's all packaged together with some superficial cinematic candy floss. I would recommend leaving this movie stuck at the bottom of the bargain bin at your local retail store. Well, at the end of the day, it's just my opinion. After all, I didn't think Cars 2 was that bad.
Kill him.
If anyone has actually watched this film, I would be curious to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Well, I'm gonna do what this movie could. Make some freaking lasagna.